Okay, welcome to Dynasty Saturday Night 5, a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast for Going For Two Live, goingfor2.com. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review to the Going For Two Live audio podcast feed. Please make sure if you're watching here on YouTube to subscribe, like, comment, bell for notifications. We must feed the algorithms what they need to be fed. We're talking about tight ends in Dynasty Fantasy Football tonight. I'm Brian Ford, as always, here with my host, whose end I've heard is kind of tight, Josh Walker.
No, I was trying to think of the perfect place to put a tight end joke in, and you beat me to it. So well played there.
Better than being a wide receiver.
Well, it depends what you're into.
That's true.
Jamie might say otherwise there in the chat. But yeah, I'm good. Happy to do this. Happy to almost finish up our little positional stuff we're doing. So
yeah, we kind of didn't necessarily plan doing like a 4-week or 4-episode positional thing, but that definitely is kind of how it turned out. We've done running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, and we are now here rounding it out with It's Only Tight End Wasteland, as The Who famously sang. So for those of you who don't know, Dynasty Saturday Night 5, we have some fun by coming up with a list of 5 things we want to talk about as sort of our vehicle for entering and unpacking the Dynasty Fantasy Football topic that we're doing. So Josh and I each have a list of 5 tight end topics that we want to talk about, and that's what we'll be going through tonight. Before we do get started, though, just generally your thoughts on tight end. The idea is that there's a few really, really good ones. Then it's like, who the hell knows? Are you a get one of the elites or wait a long time fantasy manager if you're in drafts or making trades, or is there something different that you do?
If I can't get Kelsey or Andrews, it's usually those two that I really go after. But even they go a little too a little quicker than I want, and I'm willing to pay. If I don't get one of them two, I usually wait. And I can't get Njoku this year, but he was my favorite target last year. I usually shoot for the guys I have ranked around 15, 16 that I can wait until like round 12, 13 to grab. Mm-hmm. And the way tight end is, you just need 600 yards and like 4 touchdowns to be a tight end one. So there's a good chance those are going to hit. So if I don't get the top 2, I usually just wait and stack up on skill players and quarterbacks in the meantime.
Yeah, because like the difference between tight end 2 and tight end 5 is huge, but like the difference between tight end 7 and tight end 14 is not, right?
Exactly.
There's a flattening that happens in the position, which we'll talk about in a little while. So that makes guys who I kind of have ranked in a pocket of guys that I do like, it makes them not necessarily as attractive at cost when I'm in like a startup or something like that. So say, for example, I don't know, a Fryermuth, a Dulcich, right? Guys that I have ranked, I have in like, my top 12 or whatever, but it's like, are they worth their ADP when I'm getting X, Y, or Z a few rounds later? That's what we'll be talking about in a little while. Let's start though with the big 3. I think everybody kind of knows Kelsey, Andrews, Pitts in some sort of order is the Dynasty big 3. There are some people, and I think our friend Kyle Senra is one of them, that Kelsey is tight end Dynasty 1 until he retires. There are some people, myself, it's between athleticism, ceiling, upside, and age. It's Pitts is tight end 1, mm-hmm. And there are some other folks who combining age and track record and good quarterback and new offensive coordinator, Mark Andrews is tight end 1. So how do you sort through the big 3?
So right now I have Pitts 1. I have Kelsey at 2, and that's only because Mark Andrews, like the past 2 years, there's been some slight injury concerns. He's had to miss some time, and Isaiah Likely's there, and I think he's going to be featured a lot more this year, which I'll talk about later. So I have Pitts 1 just because his age, his ability. He had 1,000 yards as a rookie, so that's very impressive. And then I have Kelsey, too, because he still has Patrick Mahomes. And even though he's, 33, 34, he doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon. But I am a little hesitant to draft Kelsey at certain points in the draft.
Yeah, so for me, I have Pitts 1 and Andrews 2, and that's in a tier. And then I have Kelsey at 3 in a tier of his own. So, like, he's 3 behind those guys, because of age and its dynasty, but he's in his own tier and not with anybody below him because of the just absolutely great, production that he's still doing and positional advantage that he can give you. And then it's, everybody else that we'll be talking about in a little bit. But before we do, time to pay some bills. Today's show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog has it all. Best ball leagues, huge tournaments, private leagues, pick'ems, for stuff coming up for seasonal projections and things. They're not just football. So, if you're a degenerate like Josh and you actually watch other sports like baseball, Underdog has stuff for that. Golf, I think they have some basketball too. Basketball's not a sport. And you can sign up if you're a new Underdog user. You can sign up with the promo code GF2, and you will get a deposit match of up to $100. So what does that mean? You don't have an Underdog account now. You go to underdog.com or download the app. You start a new Underdog account. You deposit up to $100. You can deposit as much as you want, but they will match up to $100, and therefore, you have at least $200 there sitting in your Underdog account. And I have been slow to get on the best ball train, but this summer it's heating up for me. I'm in a million Underdog drafts just because it keeps me from getting in trouble with 700 startups. But also, I kind of have been digging into best ball content a little bit too, like strategy and things like that, so I kind of been riding that wave. But yeah, they got cool stuff. They got Scott Fishbowl Satellite. They've got Puppy. They got Best Ball Mania. They got a little higher stakes stuff like the Mastiff or the Bulldog or whatever, a Dalmatian, where you're dropping some higher coin there. But then they've got other ones where you can just say, hey, let's just get in a 12-person slow draft with 11 people for $3 and have some fun, right? So yeah, they got all sorts of things you can do. So yeah, go to goingfor2.com. Go to underdog.com or the Underdog app and enter promo code GF2. Put some money down, start playing, and maybe even start winning. All right, let's tie up some loose ends about tight ends. We each have a list of 5 topics we want to talk about tonight. I'm going to kick us off because I think it flows from the big 3 into my first question, which is how big is that next tier and who's in it, right? And what do we think of those guys? So, for me, 4, 5, 6 is Hawk, Goddard, Kittle, and that's it. That's the tier. I think I also want to ask you, where's that line where you stop feeling good about someone being your tight end 1, which can be relative depending on the format and things like that. I pretty much exclusively play in tight end premium, but for me, the next 3 are Hawk, Goddard, Kittle. That's a tier. I think each of them has different aspects that they bring to it that make them, I think, worthy of that tier. That next tier for me is Kincaid, Muth, and Waller. Kincaid, huge ceiling. I've talked about him a lot. I love him. I was more than willing to drop the 110 on him in tight end premium rookie drafts. But he's still a rookie, so he's kind of at the top of that next tier. I haven't put him in with the big boys yet. And I want to talk a little bit about Waller, too. Despite being 31 and having 2, injury-impacted seasons, I'm not baking injury into predictions, and he's going to get peppered with targets in that offense. It's Darren Waller, who's 6'6" and 250, and then 700 other wide receivers who are all slot guys, and nobody's really all that big. Colin Johnson is their biggest big wide receiver, and he's coming back from a major injury and is kind of a bust so far anyway, right? So I think there's a little bit of a bounce back in Waller's production and value. So I've got him there. And then for me, that might be where the end of where I'm super comfortable with guys as my tight end 1. My next tier is 10 through 17 or something like that. And the guys at the top of that tier, Njoku, Dulcich, McBride, guys like that, I'm more comfortable with as my tight end 1 than guys at the bottom of that tier, which would be like the rookies, Laporta, Mayer, and then like Dalton Schultz, who I think could get peppered with targets in his first year working with a rookie quarterback in Houston. But I'm not loving the thought of him as my tight end one. So like where does that line of confidence end for me? I think it's after my top 9. So what say you about that next tier, and then also like where's your line of confidence, so to speak?
Yeah, so because sometimes I like to get a little dicey with tight end and really wait. So honestly, my line cuts off at my 24th tight end. Like obviously I don't want to be in this situation, but if I draft the skill players enough, I should still feel okay. And I usually stock up with like Gesicki's the last one and that I would think I can compete with as my starter. And it goes all the way up to McBride at 12. So 12 to 24 are all the people that, I'd rather them be a tight end too. But if I wait and I really like slam all my other positions, I have 3 starting quarterbacks, then I'll look to go from anyone in that tier. The tier I have above that goes from 4 to 11. So I have bigger tiers in general. That's the tier I usually look for value to drop. It starts at Hawkinson, ends at Waller at 11. It's got Dulcich, Kincaid, Njoku, Freiermuth, Goddard. I'll take them, but I'm not going to reach on them. So if one of those guys fall and I think it's good value, I'll take them. But otherwise, I'm going to wait for my my big 12-person tier, which has all the ones most people have as a tight end too. And I've actually showed last year to make it work pretty well if I do that. But you do have to hit your other picks to do. Otherwise, you're in trouble if your other picks don't hit.
Yeah, and everything really realistically is a trade-off. So for those of you playing along at home, if you go to goingfor2.com and then hover over Dynasty and click on hover over rankings and click on Dynasty parentheses 2023, you can see every ranker's rankings, including Josh's and mine. If you want to see so that's the composite on the left. If you want to see the order that any individual ranker has the guys in, you would click on the date beneath their name. I know sometimes it doesn't look like you can click on it because it's the cursor bar and not like an arrow or a finger. But yeah, you can click on it. And real quick from the chat, we talked about best ball strategy. After we get off live, don't worry, folks, that's not going to happen. Jerry and Jamie are gonna do a pre-record of a best ball podcast. We're gonna start doing some one-offs here at Going for Two, about certain fantasy stuff like whatever drafts and best ball and projections and evergreen type topics. All right. So what is your first tight end topic?
So I've got 3 questions and 2 buys. So I'm going to start off with the first question, and it's some not really recent news, but fairly recent news that really made me switch my rankings up a little. And the question is, I'm going to pause it to you after I make my case here. Does Evan Ingram signing a 3-year deal with the Jags boost his dynasty value? And for me, it's yes. Before this, I had him at 20, which I do admit was a little bit low. But in the dynasty aspect, I'm looking 2 to 3 years down the road. And before he signed that contract, we didn't know where he'd be after that. And I felt a lot of his production was tied to Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence in that offense. So it's kind of scared me a little, him going somewhere else. But now that I know that he's going to be there for 3 more years, I moved him up to 13. You have him at 13. Going for 2 has him at 12 consensus. So I caught up with the market. He's paired with Trevor Lawrence, who's going to be arguably a top 5 quarterback moving forward in his career. He finally had the breakout he had since his rookie season and it's been disappointing since. And he really has no competition heading into the season. The next person on the depth chart is Brenton Strange, who's also a rookie, I believe. So, I mean, he is the guy there, and he showed to be, even with Ridley, Zay Jones, and Christian Kirk, he's still got a lot of targets, got a lot of yards, and pretty good touchdown equity. The only thing that people knock on him is they say he's injury prone, but he's played 40 games in the past 3 seasons, which is pretty good for a tight end. So I think we can take that injury tag off of his name because he seemed to be pretty healthy now. So did you or will you consider moving him up, or is it just kind of the same for you?
So it's funny, right? Because on the other Dynasty podcast I do, Dynasty Fever, I was talking with the co-host Jesse Schneeman, and I moved Ingram up to 13 with the signing of the contract. So I was considering having him higher, but when they only franchised him and when he only had a guaranteed 1 year with Trevor, I was kind of hedging it a little bit. And I think at the time I was talking to Kyle Senra and he had Ingram as high as 7 at that point, right? Yes, I think I did bump him from like 15 or 16 to like 13, but in the same tier. The guaranteed money is 24 million. I think it looks like the guaranteed quote unquote like time that he'll be there is probably the 2 years, but you're really only playing Dynasty in a 2 or 3 year window anyway. Yeah. The devil's advocate concerns with Evan Ingram are like, I think I'm trying to Google it, the stat here, but like 48% of his fantasy points in 2022 came from like 3 or 4 spike weeks towards the end of the year. And I remember those weeks. They were glorious weeks in DFS, right? And you can say on the one hand, well, okay, that's a sign of things to come. Doug Peterson likes to use tight ends. Trevor Lawrence is a very good quarterback, ascending offense, athletic tight end coming into his own, et cetera, right? But you could also say, I don't know, maybe that he's just riding, like when people, what is it called? It's anchor bias, when like your first impression shapes what you think, and then it's recency bias when like later. So like, it could be a recency bias thing where like, those last few weeks or those spike weeks are really influencing it because it happened at the end of the season, and that's how people are seeing him. The other, I think, devil's advocate case against him is he's now in an offense that is adding Calvin Ridley, right? And I think has 2 running backs that I think, Tank Bigsby more than Etienne, but both of them who are competent as pass catchers. They did spend 2nd-round draft capital on Strange. Like, he's only a rookie, but they did like his athleticism and stuff like that. So, and they said so by spending a 2nd-round pick on him. So, yes, it did increase his value for me personally, but A, not much, and B, apparently not as high as some other people. Like Jesse had him at 9. I think Kyle, I don't know where he
Ryan
has
him at 7. Kyle has him at 10.
Yeah.
So it's Ryan that has him at 7.
Yeah.
Kyle might have moved him back if he had him there.
Yeah, so I think some people are really in on it. I'm, I guess, maybe in the middle on him. I don't know.
Same. Yeah, I had him at 20 because of the Calvin Ridley. I don't know if Calvin Ridley does have some height, but I watched every game they played as a Falcon. That dude can separate at any level. He gets open in the red zone too. So I think he's going to get underrated amount of red zone targets just because he can get open anywhere on the field.
Yeah, I'm actually a little low on Ridley, I think, compared to market. But yeah, I don't know. It's this age-old thing in fantasy, right? Like, is this going to be a rising tide? It lifts all boats and the offensive pie grows so everybody's okay, or is it going to be a mouths to feed narrative, right? And I think it's hard to tell. I'm not somebody who sits down and does mathematical projections, so maybe I'm not the best guy to answer that question. But people are, when you can't call for more targets for Travis Etienne, right? And more, and Ingram to keep his level, and Ridley to eat most of Zay Jones' targets plus more. Like, they can't all happen at the same time, right? Like, unless something goes like nutso, where the offense is doing a lot more than we expected for one reason or another. So I don't know. I'd be careful with him. Let me ask you this, right? Because it's always about cost, right? So he's going off the board in Superflex tight end premium drafts that are, and I have the settings for the premium is 0.5 to 1.0, right? So anything below or above, right? He's going at the 1102 at tight end 13, right? And so he's going before Dulcich and Chig, right? But he's going 2 whole rounds after Waller and Mayer. Half a round ish after Laporta, almost a whole round after Njoku. Like, that's not a bad price.
Yeah.
Right? The 11th round, right? So do you think, like, relative to other tight ends, the market has caught up to the idea that this contract might mean something? I guess that's a question too.
Yeah, I think so, because in some drafts I've done, I've seen him go in the 8th, 9th round, but I think people are finally starting to catch on to the fact that there might be too many mouths to feed. You got 3 really good, competent receivers and 2 running backs who are going to be at least relevant in the passing game. So I think it's catching up. I like the spot. If he was there in the 11th round, I'd take him. For some reason, he's just not usually there, so I don't really have too many shares of Evan Ingram. But the only person ahead of him I really wouldn't take over him is Sam Laporta, just because he's a rookie. I really like him, but I would still take Ingram. But unless I'm trying to win now and I already have kind of an older roster, I'll probably take Mayer over him still, just in hope for in 2 or 3 years he's going to be a top, 7, 8 tight end. But yeah, I like the 11th round for him. I think that's a perfect spot.
So, excuse me. Let's see here. My next topic is the case against TJ Hawkinson. This is kind of a devil's advocate sort of thing. Like, it's not like I don't like Hawkinson. I mean, he's my tight end 4, right? So, we're in a startup ongoing, and a pick was made in the middle, like mid 4th round. Let me pull it. I think it might have been actually exactly the 408, which is exactly his ADP.
I think it was.
But it was a few picks ahead of your pick. 409. And you seemed a little upset that Hawkinson went. You were hoping he would get to you.
Yeah, I almost traded up for that pick.
Yeah. Let me make the case against TJ Hawkinson just because it's fun, right? Yep. It's July, right? Fantasy points per game didn't change much despite the increase in targets in his time with the Vikings compared to his arc of time with the Lions, particularly like the last couple of years, right? In half PPR, he had 7 top 12 finishes in 2022, and he had 10 top 12 finishes in 2022 in full PPR. Out of 17 games. Not bad, but not lighting the world on fire. In a 1.5 tight end premium format, unless my math is way off, 13.31 points per game, which is good, but not elite, right? And it was driven by some spike weeks, which a lot of points per game stuff is, but that's something to keep in mind. Like, one of the reasons that we're slightly fading Kittle, or a lot of people are slightly fading Kittle, is it's hard to predict when those good games are coming, right? And the floor is a little shaky, although there's some ceiling, right? So he's a target hog, and premiums, Hawkinson, and tight end premiums, really do favor target hogs, but it's not really translating. Partly because he's not really scoring touchdowns. He only had 6 touchdowns last year, despite spending most of the year on that high octane offense with really the best pass option after Jefferson besides him being, an aging out Adam Thielen.
KJ Osborne even.
Now this year, right, they add rookie Jordan Addison. The bad Thielen is gone and replaced, in a sense, by Addison. KJ Osborne, he's okay. He's a good little player. If you listen to people who follow the Vikings and you listen to the coaches as much as they will tell you the truth, KJ Osborne is not an unimportant part of this offense, right? So when you think about like the targets that Addison will get, the role that KJ Osborne will play at least to be annoying and cap a ceiling. When you look at the fact that, that Minnesota offense had like a historic year as far as pass attempts and winning like 11 one-score games, and like, are they going to be as good as they were last year offensively? I don't know that any of Dalvin Cook's targets really move a lot to Hawkinson, because Madison and Chandler and if they sign somebody, he'll probably eat those up anyway. And then also from a dynasty perspective, what is Kirk Cousins' future? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is his last year of his contract, right? Could be a free agent after this year or something. And he's already 34, 35. So, you know, I have Hawkinson as my tight end 4, but here's the thing. I don't love spending the 408 on him when Goddard's going at the 608, right? When Kittle is 30, but he's going at the 512. When Muth is going at the 711, like, I don't know. Am I spending that 4th round? Am I saying he's 1 round in ADP worse than Kyle Pitts? And but then also, I'll shut up after this. As I'll devil's advocate against my devil's advocate. And it's also about not just where other tight ends are going, but who else is going in the 4th round, right? And so we've got JSN, Cup, London, Eckler, Etienne, and Walker, 2 guys I'm selling, especially at cost. DK Metcalf, same, selling, especially at cost. Jacobs, Vanilla Vic, it's a little high for me for Vanilla Vic at that point. And then Devontae Adams, probably the end of a wide receiver 1 tier there, but also has questions and age and things like that. And then Najee, right? So, how many of those guys would you rather have than Hawk? So you're not just comparison shopping Hawkinson to other tight ends that are going later. You're also comparison shopping him to who am I giving up to take him? And of those guys, I maybe would be okay with Devontae ahead of Hawkinson. If I thought Jacobs was going to play, I'd be comfortable with him above Hawkinson. I could make the case for Eckler and DK, although that would be a tough click. And I think, Cup, London, and JSN, I think are all guys that you can make a good case to take above a tight end and take a tight end later. So, I don't know. That's my devil's advocate case against spending buying TJ Hawkinson at cost.
So just to sum up my thoughts on Hawkinson, the main reason I wanted him is because I have literally 0 shares of TJ Hawkinson across almost 20 dynasty leagues. And a lot of that is because of the cost and where he goes. And I'd rather take some of these other guys. But this particular draft we're doing, I'm trying to get a little different. I'm trying to draft some guys I don't normally have to try and diversify, but also to stay competitive. So that was the main reason I wanted him. I was kind of upset. I just like to mess with Thomas and tell him he sucks. So a lot of it was that just because it's fun, but also, I was just trying to get different. I don't have Hawkinson, and a lot of that is because of where he's going. He goes as early as the 3rd round in some drafts I do, especially in 0.75 or full point tight end premium. So that was really it. I agree with what you said. I mean, I do like him. I like the Vikings offense, but his price is just a little too rich for me at the moment.
Yeah, Wyatt from JWB checking in. Thanks for hopping on and hopping in the chat. He likes Hawk, but the value can be pretty high in some leagues and startups and trades, and so he finds himself more out than in.
Exactly.
I think we're right in line there. Jamie, did I make the right choice? And I think he's talking about the startup we're in, JSN over Hawkinson. Probably.
Yes.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay. All right. What's your next tight end topic?
All right. My next one, I'm realizing I didn't do these on the show sheet, and I screwed up doing that. So I'm going to do one of my buys. I'm going to go with the deep buy. This one will be brief because buy Jake Ferguson. I have him ranked 26. You agree with me on this one. You have him ranked 28, so we're pretty close. Going for 2 has him at 35. Some people didn't even rank him.
Wait, pause 1 second. I'm sorry. I think I have Schoonmaker around 28, and I have Ferguson in the 30s, don't I?
Let me see. I have it up right here. I might have wrote down the wrong person.
Live shows, folks. This is where the magic happens. Yeah, I've got Schoonmaker at 28 and Ferguson at 39. So
I must have just gotten them two mixed up then. Okay, well, you don't agree with me, so that makes it even better because our rankings are very similar in all the people I'm talking about. So my main reason to buy him, and this is obviously I don't want him anything less than a tight end 3 just because that's where he's going. So me saying bye, don't have him as your tight end 1 or 2, just in case. But I think he's a great tight end 3. And really it's a competition. They did draft Schoonmaker. He's solid, but he's also a rookie tight end, and they had some rookie tight ends last year. And the only other competition is Peyton Hendershot. So I do, at least in my opinion, I think Jake Ferguson, at least to start the year, is going to be the guy as they kind of ease Schoonmaker in. So I think at his cost, it hurt. Like, it doesn't do you any wrong drafting him there and just hoping that he gets at least some of the targets Dalton Schultz got. And it could be a carousel 3-way, but it was last year, and Schultz still was a tight end 1, if I remember correctly, right there around 12 or 11.
Yeah.
So I mean, top 10 offense. I think he's going to, at least to start the year, be the first guy Dak looks to, and that in itself holds some value.
So I guess before I, respond more fully, like, what make the case for him above the guy that they said we have Ferguson, but we're still going to spend a second round on Schoonmaker?
Well, it's kind of like they had Schultz last year, and they still went and drafted Hendershot, and so I think they just like to have a full tight end room. I think they wanted to keep it young. So I do think Schoonmaker in the long term might be a little bit better of an option. I think I have him ranked very close, but I think just for this year, especially for trying to compete now where he's going, it doesn't hurt you to take a shot. And if it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. He's sitting down at the bottom of your bench.
Yeah. So Ferguson, I think was a sneaky, for me, 2022 rookie tight end. He was in my top 12 as far as rookie tight ends go. And I think that class in general has flashed more than we expected them to. And I was on the buy Ferguson train, I think, until they got Schoonmaker. And I looked into Schoonmaker a little more and saw how underrated I thought he was. And listen, it's perfectly reasonable to think that in the end, Ferguson, ends up to be the tight end to have in this case. A couple of things that concern me, though, also include, I don't know what's happening with that offense. Like, they didn't bring in any more running backs yet, but the buzz is, whatever the buzz is worth, is that, they want to run the ball more. You'll hear Cowboy fans say they're worried about the offense. You'll hear folks, I don't want to say fading Dak, but bumping Dak down in 2023, sort of assuming the offense isn't going to be as good. So if I was more certain about the offense, I think I'd be a little more sold on Ferguson. But it also, again, it's about cost. It's about the price, right? So, you're able to get Ferguson fairly, practically free, right, in startup drafts at around 2007 here. And so he's got a path, right? So I can't disagree that, what the heck, roll the dice, it's a cheap. I just don't know. I just have concerns, those concerns about the path. Yeah.
I mean, 450 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns, you already exceed the value you draft him at. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like, this is a very deep buy. This is, he should not be anywhere near your lineup. Yeah. But also, Mike McCarthy is a coach, so it makes perfect sense that they go out and get Brandon Cooks. You got Gallup back, and then they say they want to run the ball with Malik Davis and Tony Pollard as your 2 backs. I don't believe it. Just based on the personnel, if they do that, they're going to be in trouble because they're going to get Pollard hurt. They're going to have to rely on Malik Davis and Ronald Jones. So, that's just – I'm not buying into that narrative as much.
Yeah, and when you think about, they also, they added Cooks, right? Mm-hmm. So, their personnel decisions aren't. And I think, I forget where I heard it, but in the years that McCarthy was calling plays in Green Bay, it was pretty high pass rate over expectation. So, I don't know, right? Yeah. So, I like it. Can't argue with that. All right. I was going to ask you a question about Ferguson, and now I completely forget.
You can come back to it.
All right. So, my next topic is, I guess might as well, piggyback on the idea of a 2022 rookie there, and it's a leading question because my answer to this question is yes, but, and that is with stronger than expected rookie class in 2022. and what we think is a strong tight end rookie class in 2023, is it going to adjust where the flattening begins and therefore make tight end less of a wasteland, right? And so want to just talk about sober honey here for a second. I'm sorry, sober money. My bad. Sober money. Goddard, right? So it's a good place to start with this topic. So I like Goddard. He's my tight end 5, right? But it's also sort of the idea that, like, well, who else, right? He's in that tier for me with Hawk and Kittle. So, like, above, you know, although arguably so, Muth and Waller and Kincaid, not by much, right? But, you know, he's also never had like a top 10 tight end season, never really had a strong touchdown total, and certainly isn't a high octane offense, but can very likely be the clear third passing option most weeks, right? So even then, my dynasty tight end 5 is somebody I'm already giving blemish marks to, right? You know, like I'm not super excited about that. It's kind of like a ranking by default, right? And so when we think about the flattening in dynasty tight end right now, it's really happening after, like, you know, some might say after the big 3. I might say after 6 or 9, right? And then it's just like it's really flat, right? I think as these 2022 and 2023 guys mature, that flattening will start later, but not much, because it's still tight end and that's still the nature of the position. And guys are going to age out, like Kelsey and, you know, other, right? And Goddard, Kittle, right? So I think, like, let's just say for the sake of argument, my flattening starts after my tight end 9, right? Maybe in a year or so, you know, and also add Brock Bowers into that mix, right? It's going to be tight end 13, 14, right? We're still going to kind of think of tight end as kind of a wasteland, but less so. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about that, right? Because in 2022, we had some guys flash that we feel good about. In 2023, we really feel good about the top 3 and can tell a good story about paths for guys like Schumacher, Musgrave, Kraft, like, right? So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm looking more at guys like, you know, I just mentioned Ferguson, but also Likely, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later too. Guys like that who, and McBride, even people who are just still a little behind on market, actually get some reps that they didn't get as a rookie just because they're a rookie and they start to improve. So I think it'll get even further than 12. I think it'll get up to like 15, 16 before it really gets ugly. And even then, I don't think it's going to be as ugly as it has been in the past once you get to that. Like, yeah, there will be a pretty significant drop off, but like I said, you should still be able to get 400 to 500 yards and a few touchdowns. So that's not terrible for a backup third string tight end.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, maybe I want to be more optimistic about tight end, you know, but I still think it's going to be pretty flat after a certain point. So the flattening is just going to be a little later, I think. And the other reason I asked this question, I probably should have prefaced this, is we've talked about this on the show before, is the way the position is changing and getting deployed. Not just increased use of 12 personnel, but increased use of the different types of tight ends that aren't just the inline tight ends, right? That's going to be a little different, right? One of the reasons we're so in on Kincaid is we're essentially saying he's Buffalo's big slot. He's Buffalo's wide receiver too, right? And as that happens more, as we see a smaller and more athletic tight end class in 2023, and as the position evolves more and we get more Chigs and Kincaids than we do Hunter Henrys, right? That could bump the position up from wasteland status and make the flattening start later. I just don't know how much later it's going to be and how optimistic to be about it.
No, that's fair. A lot of that's going to be riding on this year's class too, because their RAS scores were through the roof, a lot of the tight ends. So they're more athletic than I've seen tight ends coming out in a while, regardless of where they go. So I think this year's going to be a really big, like, it's going to really tell a lot for the future of tight end, how the rookies continue to do.
All right, so what is your next tight end topic?
So my next tight end topic, I'm going to talk about Trey McBride. And I just did it in a little question. It's like, why is the market so low on Trey McBride? I have him ranked 12th. You do too, and hopefully I got your ranking right this time. Going for two
Yeah.
has him at 16, Fantasy Pros at 17, and Bulletproof ADP, which takes Sleeper ADP, goes 13.10. So the tight end 18. He showed, like, once Ertz got hurt, he showed really good flashes of the potential he had when he got drafted. And they're going to be playing behind a lot this year. They're going to be one of the worst teams in football. His only competition will be Ertz, who's on the tail end of his career and showed signs of slowing down even when he was healthy. I don't think he's the same Zach Ertz that was at Philadelphia, and he's now got some injury issues. And really the main reason, and this is even a plus for Ertz, their main receiving options, I'm going to put their height. Marquise Brown is 5'9", Greg Dortch is 5'7", Rondell Moore is 5'7". Outside of rookie Michael Wilson and basic glorified blocker Zach Pascal, the only big options are McBride and Ertz, and I think that's going to result in a lot of targets over the middle, especially for either McCoy, who's experienced, just looking to take the safe option, or Clayton Tune, who's a rookie and just looking for a solid target. I think McBride and Ertz will do that. More so McBride just because of his athleticism over Ertz. And this goes for all the pass catchers on Arizona. I'm not knocking everyone as much as a lot of people are just because it's Clayton Tune or McCoy for part of the year. Like, this is Dynasty, and you're still going to have either Kyler Murray or even possibly Caleb Williams in the future. So this is 2 or 3 years like ranking. So Trey McBride should be borderline tight end 1, and he's just not. So why do you think the market's so low on him? Do you think it's the bad offense?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think it took a while for him to see the field with any regularity. And in the meantime, Dulcich was performing well. It is a dumpster fire team. And I just think it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind, right? I completely agree with you. As you see, I have him ranked 12. December 18th at Denver, 4 catches for 55 yards. Pretty good week before that. 6 targets, caught 3 for 28. And then, really good week on New Year's Day. 10 targets, caught 7 balls for 78 yards and a touchdown. Zach Ertz isn't just like his career might be like that was like a multiple ligament knee injury, right? And so we were gonna go in the Wayback Machine here. I know you're young. You know Wayne's World, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, right. We're go back to February 2022. We were being told the rookie class, a tight end, was McBride and Wiedermeyer and pray for rain, right? Then it was like McBride, Wiedermeyer, probably Dulcich too, and then pray for rain, right? What has happened since then to make you any less excited about Trey McBride as a well-rounded second-round draft capital tight end prospect? The only evidence, the only data we have, right, is pretty good in the flashes that he's right. So there's nothing that has told us he can't play. Is it maybe a bit of a concern that it took him a little while to get acclimated and get on the field? It's a rookie. It's tight end, right? It was a weird year, right? And I think you make a good point that no matter who's quarterback, they're gonna be throwing a lot, right? And outside of Hollywood Brown, there ain't much there to throw to, right? Like, I think they're going to get a lot. I think James Conner is going to get a lot of targets. He's probably, a buy low for a 1-year window there. So yeah, I don't know. Like the answer I think is kind of out of sight, out of mind, and then everybody got jazzed up on Dulcich and Chig from that class, and the idea I think that it's a bad team and Ertz is still technically in the picture. Here's the thing about July, right? And we're starting to creep into August, and it's going to change a little bit. Now is the time, really, and I always say this, and then I never have time to do it because I have 40 effing teams, but make the moves on the value now.
Yep.
Right? Because as more people start paying attention and as actual news starts coming out of camp and preseason games, like, you know, these values are going to change, right? The running backs are going to become pricier. We're going to get good news on McBride that he's a clear tight end one on the team, right? Like, so make the moves now.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm with you. I guess I'm a little ahead of market on Trey McBride. I'm curious. Did you see where he was on KTC at all? Or
no, I didn't. I thought about throwing KTC in, but because I've been so busy lately, I've been. I just did the bare bones. I'll pull it up real quick. Keep trade cut.
Yeah,
where they got him.
Yeah, because that tends to be a sentiment indicator of the market. I know people have problems with it. I have problems with it too. But in general, it kind of like tells you okay, so here are the people in your sleeper leagues. This is what they think, right? Yeah. And they often overvalue and undervalue folks. Yeah. And it's quite possible that McBride is one of them.
Yeah, McBride on KTC is 167 overall, tight end 18.
Yeah, and I just think that's too low. Who's like the next few guys ahead of him in the tight end?
They have Dalton Schultz at tight end 17, which is kind of wild. Then Cole Kmet, then Njoku at tight end 50. Wow, this is weird. I don't.
They must love Mayer and Laporta.
Yeah, they got Mayer and Laporta at 10 and 9.
Yeah,
that's wild. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have Schultz at 17, but I got McBride 5 spots ahead, not 1 spot behind.
Hey, I'm going to remember, use these trade calculators. If you disagree with them, use them to your advantage to people who use them religiously,
Yeah. So my fourth topic is, and I kind of like alluded to it before, and that's what are we doing with Kincaid, right? How far are we leaning into this ceiling? How much do we trust that he'll reach it? And is the price too high? So one thing that we talked about with quarterbacks, is that like in the narrow context of a rookie draft, right? It's one thing to be excited about Anthony Richardson, to spend a 103 on Bryce Young, right? It's another when you now put them in with everybody else and you're in the trade streets and the startups. And then are they being overvalued and undervalued, right? And to me, the rookies almost across the board are being overvalued. And that's showing up in quarterback. Personally, I think Stroud and Young and even Richardson are going too high in startup ADP, right? I'm wondering if the same is true about Kincaid, right? So, like, he's my tight end 7, right? He's at the top of that tier, right? And, my colleague Jesse has him at tight end 5, right? Like, loves him even more, right? I was totally the church of Dalton Kincaid. If you're at the 110 and a tight end premium, right? Like, and the other people around there are Charb, who I like, Zay Flowers, who I kind of like, right? Flirting with picking Will Levis, right, etc., right? Like you're pounding, for me personally, smashing that button to draft Kincaid because of the huge ceiling, because of the way the team just effusively praises him and loves him, traded up to get him. General manager said he's basically going to be, our slot. We're going to play a lot of 12. We're going to see nickel, even though we're going to be in 12, right? The metrics guys in Buffalo, best hands, we've ever had, metrics on, right? So like I was all about Kincaid. I said to people, I know that you don't spend first round rookie picks on tight ends. This guy's not a tight end. You're drafting Buffalo's wide receiver 2, right?
Yeah.
And he's going off the board in startups at tight end 7, which in and of itself, okay, that's cool. I'm with it. But you need to spend a 7th round pick on it. And people who follow Buffalo, right, will tell you, and I agree that Dawson Knox ain't going anywhere really. Like, he's going to be on the field a lot, right? In fact, he's probably going to – I know that route participation matters more than snap count, right? Snap percentage, right? But, like, he's going to be on the field pretty much all the time. And Kincaid's going to have to earn the playing time with Shakir, Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, right? You know, he's not necessarily competing for the same type of targets as Gabe Davis, but you know, certainly a quarterback might have a choice on a given play of the intermediate target with Kincaid, although he can, you know, press the seam, and going up top with Gabe Davis, you know, right? So that's there, right? Josh Allen also has, if James Cook is going to take a step forward, I don't love him, but you know, it is what it is, right? He's got a lot of guys to throw to, in other words, right? So especially in 2023, I think you need to be patient with Dalton Kincaid. And so here's the conclusion. I'll shut up in a second. If you didn't get him in a rookie draft, if you didn't stash him by taking him at that 110, I don't know if I can tell you to spend a 7th round pick on him in a startup when that's the same round as, you know, safer options like Muth. When it's 2 rounds ahead of Mayer and Waller.
Yep.
When it's 3 rounds ahead of Laporta. When it's 4 rounds ahead of Greg Dulcich. Right? You know, and when it's 4.5 rounds ahead of Chig, who you're going to talk about in a little bit, right? Like, and then your opportunity cost is, you know, Geno, if you didn't get a QB2 yet, Lance, if you want to roll the dice there, Terry McLaurin, if you believe in Swift, I kind of don't. Godwin, who some people think is undervalued, Jordan Love, right? Zay Flowers, Russ Wilson, Jahan Dotson, Muth, Hollywood Brown at the end of the 7th round. Like, that's the other guys going in the 7th round. So it's a combination of what tight end you can get later and who you're giving up in the 7th round. I don't know that I can advise people to buy Kincaid at cost in a startup.
No, I agree 100%. I remember going during the rookie drafts. I remember saying, I'm not even going to touch Kincaid in the 1st round, just because, you know, I think there is going to be, even though he's going to see the field a lot, he's still a rookie. And, you know, there's still Shakir, there's Gabe Davis, there's Dawson Knox still there. So the only share I have of him is one I got him in the early 2nd round in a rookie draft. And I think,
okay, I've got like 8
yeah, I was already out, and I was drafting Zay Flowers because Bateman's already on the PUP list. Beckham's coming off a knee injury. So, I mean, yeah, it's at that cost. Like I said earlier at the start of the show, if I don't get a tight end in the first 3 rounds, I'm waiting until round 9 or 10, not, you know, 7, when I can get other players that I like much better. I do want to make one last point about Kincaid. I think my strategy with Kincaid is when he struggles coming out of the gate, if people get frustrated, I'm going to start sending trade offers and buy low if people get frustrated thinking he was going to come out the gate as a tight end 1. Like, it's obviously an investment. You know, I don't expect him to be a tight end 1 year 1. I have him ranked 9th, so I think it'll be there in 2 or 3 years. But I'm gonna try and take advantage of a frustrated manager who expected him to jump in instantly and produce.
Yeah, no, that's. I think we might even do a whole episode on like moves to prepare to make in the first few weeks, right?
I like that.
When X offense starts slow, right? You know, get ready to buy this guy, right? When X offense starts fast, get ready to sell this guy, right?
Yeah, getting ahead of it and not wait until almost the playoffs could be very beneficial to you.
All right, what's your next tight end topic?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with my other buy, and this is Isaiah Likely. And this is, I'm going to go with the rankings. I have him ranked 21. You have him 19, so you're kind of on the same page as me. But a lot of people are going for 2 is at 27, Fantasy Pros 23, Bulletproof ADPs, tight end 20 in the 15th round. And I think that's the perfect spot for him to be. And I think, you know, a lot of it is the signing of Todd Monken. I boosted Lamar Jackson up my rankings. Mark Andrews is still a top 3 tight end. And the main reason for that, I touched on it on an earlier show. He ran the 12 personnel over 50% of the time at UGA, which is 2 tight end, 2 wide receiver, 1 running back. And I think that fits perfectly to the Ravens just because they have 2 really good tight ends. You know, they have 3 wide receivers right now. But I think the fact that he was able to use some read options and screen passes, you know, I think likely he's going to not just be a handcuff and actually have standalone value. I mean, he showed last year he could be productive, had, I think, 3 or 4 touchdowns, 300 yards, something. And there's like I see a scenario happening where Odell Beckham gets hurt due to his age. Bateman's already hurt, and it's just Zay Flowers basically there. So I think most of the targets are going to funnel through Andrews and Likely. So I think the market's also caught up. But if you can get him where he's going at tight end 20, do it, because he has a like top 15 upside even with Andrews still there, even if Andrews stays healthy.
Yeah, I approve. You have my seal of approval on buy Isaiah Likely. We talk about when we talk about buys, there's different reasons a person can be a buy, and anybody's a buy, right? But when we're identifying a buy for the purposes of analysis, it's is the market too low on the person? Do we expect the value in production to go up? Is the cost really good relative to right? So and I think for me, like the cost right now is good relative to what you're going to see. I think it's worth the risk to buy in now, thinking that it's that offense is arrow up with Monk in there. It's just a question of like what's his role going to be and what's the volume going to be, right? Like, is the offense going to be, obviously, Mandrews is essentially a wide receiver. Beckham is, I don't know, maybe a little more than a decoy on the outside. Flowers, you're hearing, is the guy they're going to move around all over the place and target in many different ways. You're hearing out of camp that they're moving Likely around the formation. I think that's good news in that they're saying here's a skilled guy and we're figuring out ways to get him targets. My co-host Jesse on Dynasty Fever says it's bad news that they're essentially saying we don't know what this guy's role is. It's the prior regime. We might need him to block. I don't know. I think cost relative to upside, I'm saying buy Likely. In startups, especially in the trade streets, put you on the spot. What might you be willing to part with for an Isaiah Likely? Say you're a team that I don't know, like is not a contender, let's just say, and you're looking to move something to a contender, and they kind of don't really need Likely for in the next year or two. What might you be looking to do?
Right off the top of my head, and I really like Rashad Penny. I would maybe try and move an aging running back that might not have more than a year or two left. Like I really like Rashad Penny, but I think him being on the Eagles, especially if Swift goes down, I think you could make that swap. Maybe probably get something a little extra on top. So probably an aging running back, just how the running back landscape has been to someone trying to win, and you can just stash him on your bench.
Like, would you take Likely and a random 24-second for Joe Mixon?
And a 24-second, yeah. No, if I'm like, I think I have a top 4 team in my league and I have 1 or 2 years left, I wouldn't. But if I feel like I'm kind of stagnant, middle of the road, I'm definitely going to make that trade.
Okay. I mean, yeah, he restructured his deal. It doesn't look like he's going to be in trouble. Looks like he's going to at least be there for. I mean,
I don't think he's a 4 yards per carry person anymore, but the volume's going to be there regardless. So,
in a really good offense, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I like that. And so my fifth and final topic is just a couple, buys and stashes. We talked about McBride. I talked a little bit about Knox. I think people are undervaluing him. He's not going to disappear. He'll have some touchdown equity, some touchdown upside. Cole Turner is interesting to me with Logan Thomas old and injured, and Eric Bieniemy finding ways to get him the ball.
Yeah, I almost put him instead of Ferguson.
Yeah. Foster Moreau is interesting to me. Underrated, undervalued, reuniting with Derek Carr, which kind of hurts my boy Juwan Johnson, right? But Gerald Everett is interesting to me as far as, if you're a contender and you need a tight end too. You're talking about Kellen Moore and Justin Herbert going to that offense, and Kellen Moore going to the offense. Justin Herbert healed from his ribs being there, right? Like, I think it's going to be a tight end friendly environment. You already talked about what Schultz did on the Cowboys with Kellen Moore. Tyler Higbee It's not pretty.
No, it's ugly.
He's 29, but he's going at like Dynasty tight end 29 or 30.
Yeah.
And unless you're a Puka truther, like, what else is Stafford, who's supposedly healthy, throwing to after Cup? The team ain't great. The offensive line ain't great. Yep. But if you're in a tight end premium, you want targets. Tyler Higbee is dirt cheap. Let's see. Stashes. Elijah Higgins converting to tight end in Miami. It's dicey because McDaniel didn't use Gesicki well, but also he didn't use him well because Gesicki can't block. So if Higgins, who's big, can pick up that blocking, we'll see. Jeremy Ruckert, I thought was underrated as in the 2022 rookie class. Ohio State tight ends are tough because they don't get used much in college. So like you have to go on skills and traits and projection. With Conklin and Uzomah, essentially really being the only guys there, I think Ruckert is a stash. I would stash Noah Gray, right? Mm-hmm. He's contingency upside with one Kelsey injury, plus Kelsey ain't going to do this forever. I would stash Cade Otton. We liked him. He flashed in 2022. Downgraded quarterback to Baker. It's going to be a terrible offense, but he's at the top of the depth chart, and Baker's not going to be there forever. And I said already, Juwan Johnson I like, and Dalton Schultz as far as a temporary buy. It's a buy and flip. Yep. He's going to get peppered with targets from a rookie quarterback as a safety blanket because the rest of the weapons are meh and also young. And I think then in the early season, then you flip him for more than you got. And that's a move that you make even if you're not a contender. You buy that tight end now for whatever it costs, knowing that in the first few weeks of the season you can flip them, right? So that's kind of like my topics of like buy stash for some guys that are maybe going under the radar. Any of those guys stand out to you as guys you like?
Yeah, I really like Noah Gray. There's a lot of leagues where I didn't even have to draft him, or if I did, it's one of my very last picks, and that could really hit if something happens to Kelsey at his age, or once he does move on, unless they go and draft someone, but he'll be the immediate guy. I like that one a lot. I'm a big Juwan Johnson guy. I really like him as a tight end too, even with Foster Moreau there. Yeah, all those I agree with. I'm not as high on Dawson Knox. I think he's going to be touchdown or bust, but given how little it takes to be a productive tight end, it could still work. You just have some dead weeks. But yeah, I'm learning tight end is the position we agree on the most and have the least disagreements, as opposed to wide receiver and running back. So yeah, I'll go and jump into my last one, and this I didn't make any changes because of this, but I'm thinking maybe we should. And this is, how will the signing of DeAndre Hopkins affect Chig? So just for some quick ranks, I have him 16. You have him 15. He's pretty much 15 on going for 2 in Fantasy Pros and Bulletproof. So, the market's pretty set on him being a fringe tight end 1. So Hopkins, when he's healthy, he demands a top 5 target share in the league. In his prime, it was 1 or 2 in the league. It's over 30%. Even last year, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was around 28-29%. So he's one of the top 5 receivers in the league that demands targets because he gets open, he makes the catches, he's so reliable and like a true wide receiver 1. Lack of opportunities was already the main concern for Chig. He's in a low pass offense with Derrick Henry, and now he's the third receiving option on that team behind Treylon Burks and DeAndre Hopkins now. And I'm just afraid he's going to end up being touchdown dependent on a team that has Derrick Henry. And I don't like that recipe. I didn't move him down. I want to, but I'm also afraid to because I do think he's really good. They started scheming plays just to get him the ball, so I do still think he'll have some value. I'm just kind of curious how you and everyone else feels about DeAndre Hopkins signing there and if it dampens your expectations for Chig, because it does mine a little. I just haven't acted upon it yet.
Yeah, so as far as that goes, like, I think I knocked Chig down 2 spots, but that also was a combination of, I think, moving Ingram up 2 spots. So
yeah,
it might have canceled each other out. I don't seem to have the faith in the type of targets that Hopkins will command. I certainly have faith in the type of coverage he will command. I think if you look at the case for Chig coming into this year before they signed D-Hop, it was efficiency, right? And just give him more volume, right? Which doesn't always work, but that's the case for him, right? I don't think that's changed too much. I think his number of target percentage could go down. I think there's going to be enough of Hopkins and Burks and Henry for defenses to worry about that Chig's going to benefit, especially down near the end zone, right? Like if you're a defense, right, and it's the red zone, you're worried about a back shoulder fade to Hopkins, and you're worried about Derrick Henry, and you got to have somebody covering somebody as big as Burks. Who's left, right? Like you can't, right? Like it's Chig's guy. I think is gonna get, some red zone looks, and it may be a low volume offense, but if Hopkins improves the overall offense, the pie might be okay. And even if it's a lower volume offense, it's a pretty concentrated target distribution among the two wide receivers and Chig. I don't think there's reason to have ding Chig too much with Hopkins there. I think it's still entirely possible for Chig to be a tight end 1 this year. I think it's entirely possible for Chig to be a tight end 6 to 8 this year if things break right. So yeah, I didn't really ding him too much. I ain't ding Burks too much either.
Same.
Because the world that I see is that Hopkins is kind of the wide receiver 2 there, right? He's a competent veteran receiver who draws enough attention of the defenses, but Burks is your X, and Chig's still going to eat, and Henry's still going to eat, and I don't know that Hopkins is going to be the target hog that people might think he's going to be. Yeah.
As soon as I say we agree on almost everything, I agreed with you up until I think Hopkins is still that guy. I think he's still going to get 28% target share. And then, that amount of volume, I didn't knock Burks either. I didn't knock anyone. I just left things as they are. I'm going to see how it goes. But I was just curious if it affected your thoughts at all. But there is only 3 guys they're going to throw to. So
right. So the 27 is doable in that offense because of the hyper concentration. It's just like, what number does that turn out to be? And how much does it eat into the other guys when there's not much else to eat into it? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, also toss in there that, like, let's assume that Tannehill plays 15 games, right? Whereas last year, some of these guys were catching balls from Josh Dobbs and Malik Willis.
No one was really catching balls from Malik Willis. He can't throw to nobody.
he wasn't even throwing them, right? Like they didn't want him to. He was so bad they didn't want him to throw. So, I mean, it's tough, right? Like yeah. I'll say this: like if folks are subscribed to Football Guys, Matt Waldman did a really good article breaking down how Hopkins might affect each guy. Slight spoiler alert, he's optimistic on a lot of these guys. There is a world, right, in which the Titans are 1-5. They hand the keys over to Levis, and who knows, right? But we have to assume that with the acquisition of Hopkins, they're looking at their window for winning with Tannehill and Henry, right? And they're saying we're going for it, right? And the thing also, too, is that they were pretty creative in how they used Chig last year. Like, he got some snaps out of the backfield running routes. Like, there's paths for him, right? And I don't know that I have any reason to be that much lower on him because Hopkins is there.
Yeah, so one thing that just came to my mind. I do think he still has tight end 1 ability, even top 10. But I also think this signing just widened his range of outcomes. Like, just say if they suck and Will Levis, like, or if Henry does vulture some touchdowns, or even Tannehill, who's not completely deficient at running. If he doesn't get more than 3 or 4, like 3 touchdowns, I'll say, I'm not so sure he won't be like a tight end 15 through 20, which is still where everyone has him ranked. So it wouldn't be that bad. And it's definitely a long-term play, I think, more so than this year now. But I do still like Chig. I like him a lot. I didn't move him down.
So just going to read you an excerpt of that article, right? So last year, the difference between the Titans' number 1 wide receiver and number 3 wide receiver was 130 yards and a touchdown, right? And Okonkwo and Hooper were only 6 yards and a touchdown apart, and they fell in between those 3 wide receivers. In 2021, not quite as tightly packed, but the 2nd and 4th wide receivers were only separated by 8 catches, 175 yards, and 3 scores. And then the tight ends were wedged in the middle, right? In 2020, the year before that, production separating the 2 best receivers amounted to 14 targets, 5 catches, and 91 yards. What separated the 6 additions scorers at the top, what separated them the most was the 6 touchdowns that A.J. Brown had, right? Tight end Jonnu Smith had 8 touchdowns, put him in the mix. And if you combine Smith with Anthony Ferkser as one receiving option, that option would have had the 2nd most productive in the tight end's passing game, right? So they've had pretty low volume passing, run heavy, high concentration of targets for 3 years, right? And we've seen the tight ends do okay, or they could do okay in that usage tree. And I think I don't think that's really going to be any different this year. I mean, if you really want to put a positive spin on it, it's that Hopkins boosts the offense so much, right? It from the offense moving the ball more, staying on the field, and him drawing more defense. That's good for everybody and not bad for him. I don't know.
So yeah, I think the best person in that offense for Chig is Derrick Henry, because I watched some of those games, and the only way Hooper and them got all those touchdowns is play action from like inside the 5, and they're just standing there wide open because they're stacking the box, loading it up for Henry. So there are some options for that to happen also. So
yeah. All right. Well, okay. I guess that just about does it, right? As we each did our 5.
Yep.
All right. Time to land the plane on this sucker. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review on the Going for 2 live audio feed. Please make sure here on the YouTube channel you are feeding the algorithm monster what it must be fed by subscribing to the channel, liking the video, hitting the bell for notifications, commenting on the video. Algorithm. Tight end, Dynasty, Fantasy Football, Dynasty. I don't think it only counts in the first couple minutes. I don't think I have to keep.
We just screwed ourselves.
All right, time for plugs. Josh, where can we find you and your work?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Rotonaut, Rotonaut. You can find all my rankings on goingfor2.com. And if I'm not mistaken, this will be the last episode for a few weeks. I'm actually moving to Virginia August 10th, so that's exciting. It'll be a good 8.5-hour move for me, so we're just going to be busy. So I'm excited for that, though. I'm excited to get started back in my new home. All
right, yeah. You can find me on Twitter at ffjunkie_, writing articles and rankings on goingfor2.com. Midweek audio-only podcast, Dynasty Fever at Dynasty Fever Pod on Twitter. Also doing a little stuff for RPO Football. Did a couple videos for them. I'm working on another one. It's going to be buy, sell, stash at each position. I don't know. Like, I'm going to break it up into a bunch of videos, but that's going to take like forever. So who knows? It'll be like October by the time I get that out. But yeah, I'm gonna be going to see Fish in Madison Square Garden the next 2 Saturdays, and my boy Josh here is in the middle of a move that culminates on the following Saturday. So yeah, we're gonna take a bit of a hiatus here and be back August 19th. In the thick of camp and preseason and all that jazz, and hopefully the guys we like haven't shattered femurs by then, and we'll see how things go. Please make sure that you go to goingfor2.com for rankings, articles. On the bottom right-hand side of the goingfor2.com website is a little purple thing for our Discord. We've got a great Discord. It's got a lot of channels. We got a lot of analysts on there. Not even really from the Going for Two family. They're just, in the mix talking. We have a podcast pretty much every night for you here on the Going for Two Live YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe and turn on those notifications. I guess that'll do it for now. We tied up some loose ends about tight ends. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. That's a wrap. And
go Braves. Go Irish.
All right.